Jolinda Stevens here talking with Jorge Barron, Executive Director of the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, about the Family Unity Act. NIRP, as it's called, provides advocacy, education, and legal representation to migrants. Jorge is one of the drafters of the Family Unity Act and its predecessor, the Trust Act. Nationally, Jorge, Unitarian Universalists have been strong partners in the struggle to obtain more equitable law grounded in love and the recognition that we all are one. There are no divisions among people that should matter. In this state, UU Voices for Justice, as you know, lobbied for the Trust Act, which failed to pass in the last session. So can you describe to us briefly what the Family Unity Act is?
Well, the Family Unity Act is a proposed legislation that would effectively try to make sure that local law enforcement here in our state stop being involved in immigration enforcement. And that can happen through a variety of ways. It can happen through the fact that some localities still continue to use immigration detainers, which are these requests from immigration to hold people in the jails. It happens because when people sometimes are stopped, even at a traffic stop, there's something on their record that comes up on the database that says that immigration wants them, and so local law enforcement feel like they have to, even though they're not required to. Many of them do, in fact, go and arrest people based on just immigration violations. And we see that as a problem for a number of reasons. One, as the name suggests, of the Family Unity Act, because it results in a lot of families being torn apart. It also is a problem because we see that people are afraid then to contact law enforcement, and that makes us all less safe, not just immigrant communities, but all of us in our state. And then finally, because it's something that's fiscally, it uses up resources that could be better spent on priorities for our state and not on helping to tear families apart. So those are some of the reasons and the rationale behind the Family Unity Act.
Thank you. With Obama poised to make this big announcement that could exempt as many as 5 million people from deportation, and with judges stepping up to protect undocumented immigrants from time to time, why do we still need this act?
Well, I think it's important to know that President Obama, we're grateful that he will be proposing to make some changes to policy in terms of certain people that may be protected or given the opportunity to be protected from deportation. But despite the fact that it will be a significant change, there's still going to be a large number of people who are still going to be left out and who are not going to be eligible. And this is particularly true for people who've had contact with the criminal justice system. We've seen that experience with the Deferred Action Program that President Obama announced in 2012 for Dreamers, that a lot of people with relatively minor violations of law, something that happened a long time ago, can lead to people not being eligible. And so they're still going to be potentially subject to deportation. And so despite the fact that we're enthusiastic about the fact that President Obama may protect some community members from deportation, we also know that it's not going to be everybody and that many people are going to be left out. And again, we don't feel like we want to have our state agencies be facilitating immigration enforcement, splitting up families. And that's why it's important that we have this law in the books, particularly as we move our immigration policy to be closer to what we hoped it would be.
Thank you for that. You're talking directly right now to the people who will decide on the lobbying priorities for Unitarian Universalist Voices for Justice for 2015. Briefly, why do you think we should select the Family Unity Act as one of them?
Well, I know that there's a lot of important priorities, but what I see as particularly important about this legislation, this proposed legislation, is that it's addressing a group of people that is politically very disfavored. Immigrant communities throughout the United States are often the subject of a lot of bias, of a lot of anger, and unfortunately, because they're not yet U.S. citizens, they don't get to participate in the political process. So they can't lobby the same way. And even though there's been a lot of advocacy from them, that's always a big barrier for them to make their voices heard in this process. So I hope that those of us that do have the opportunity to vote and to influence the political process as legislators and others will advocate on their behalf and stand by their side and particularly support them, because many of them have engaged in tremendous advocacy already and have shown and put themselves at risk sometimes, but being very open about their undocumented status and possibly putting themselves at risk of deportation. So they're willing to take that risk to make sure that they are achieve a just outcome. So I hope all of us can join them in supporting them at a time, again, when there's so much animosity and so much bias and frankly a lot of racism and xenophobia from a number of quarters. And so I think it's a particular piece of legislation that is going to help push back on that, and that I hope will garner the support from all of you.
Thank you so much, Jorge, for being with us and answering all these questions. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Joel.